The Wood Elves in Total War Warhammer, or Total War Warhammer 2 for that matter, are suffering from a bit of a campaign issue, right? They're very fun to play and competitive. They have a great full roster. I believe their entire 8th edition roster is in the game. But one thing that is really missing from them are some of their legendary lords. They only have 2 legendary lords. The other 2, Araloth and Draika, are not in the roster, as well as the Twilight Sisters of Twilight. So in this video today, I want to talk about what it would be like if they were to do a DLC with the Wood Elves, and if that were to be Araloth. Now, I'll let you guys know right out the gate here, 37 seconds into this video, I don't think that we would see a Wood Elf DLC. I know that Rich had talked about, hey, what if we did Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2 DLCs during the AMA? But that this isn't like a conjecture video about anything that they've said. It's me saying, okay, what would it be like if they were to do this? Because I think we do need more legendary lords, and I think Araloth is extremely boring. But let's talk about why I think he should be, or why he would make a good legendary lord. So we're going to go and read into the lore blurb about him, so you guys have a good idea about his overall lore and history, because he does kind of have a bit of a cooler, well, he's got a bit more of a unique lore than you would think, considering he's such a vanilla lord. So here is Araloth, the Lord of Halcyon. Araloth was not always a hero. In his youth, he was a craven lordling who had not the mettle to hunt any prey that could hunt him in return. Whilst others went to battle in his stead, Araloth caroused and hunted in the company of worthless friends and tried to forget his shame. It was upon one such hunt that Araloth was thrown from his horse and separated from all companions save for Scairn, his trusted hawk. After wandering lost for many hours, Araloth came to a strange glade. Though dawn had broken scant hours before, the lordling now beheld a crescent moon hanging low in a darkened sky. It was a scene to stir the heart, yet Araloth scarcely saw it. He had eyes only for the elf maiden who stood alone at the glade's heart, and the monstrous, four-armed demon that menaced her. There at last, Araloth found his courage, for even his craven heart could not abandon the maid to the demon's cruel pleasures. Before he realized it, Araloth was running to her, and his hunting spear soon gouged the demon's flank. The beast was swift, and Araloth would have perished from his counterblow had Scairn not descended from the skies to tear out the demon's eyes. Blinded, the beast flailed madly, but Araloth ducked easily under its claws and thrust his spear deep into its black heart. As the demon fell dead, Araloth closed his eyes, amazed both at his victory and at the courage with which he had won it. When he opened them once more, the demon's body had vanished. Looking upon the maiden once more, Araloth saw at last beyond her mortal guise, and knew that he was in the presence of a goddess. Long they walked into the stars, the goddess and the lordling. They spoke of many things, and she revealed to him many wonders. The goddess told of how she had watched and counseled the elves since the dawning of the world, speaking plainly with the creator allowed it, and through dreams when he would not. But even the power of the gods must fade, she said sadly. Hers was nearly spent, but she still had 3 great gifts to bestow. Araloth, freed now of his fears, was the first of these, a hero to defend the elves in the coming dark. The second would be Araloth's firstborn daughter, a savior to bring hope when it was needed most. Of the third gift, however, the goddess would not speak, for there were some secrets even she could not share. Soon after, Araloth fell into a deep sleep. When he awoke, he did so in his hall with his friends at his bedside. He had been thrown from his horse, they said, his senses scattered by the fall. When Araloth told them of his tale, his companions laughed, thinking that he had dreamt it all. Not wishing to be thought mad, Araloth laughed as well. But his heart knew the truth. In the years after, Araloth became the fearless hero that the goddess had foretold, his triumphs the inspiration for many a song. Following the Battle of Ardennes, in which Araloth slew Morghur the Corrupter, the Mage Queen decreed that he would thereafter be her royal champion, an honor not bestowed in living memory. Yet despite the renown and the accolades Araloth has never forgotten, she who made him thus. So it is that on those nights when the crescent moon shines down upon Athalloran, Araloth the Bold embarks upon the hunt with Scairn as his only companion, hoping to meet with his beloved goddess once more. Kind of a cool little lord here for an otherwise pretty boring hero. Now, the crazy thing about him in End Times is that the daughter that they're talking about the daughter that he has is the one with Lilith, which is the goddess that they're talking about in this lore blurb. In the end of the End Times, just bear with me on this, and this is why I'm begrudgingly putting off doing the End Times Elves video, but Araloth and Lilith have their daughter. Araloth and the daughter, as well as some of the spirits of some of the greatest Bretonnian knights, get ferried into a new world with Caldor Drago from 8th edition or from 7th edition Grey Knights Warhammer 40,000. I'm not even fucking around. That's like 100% like true. They don't say Caldor Drago in the books, but it says a knight with silver armor that stood taller than everyone, blue gleaming eyes, and a sword and a weapon that belched blue fire. That is a Grey Knight if I ever heard of one. So it's really heavily believed to be Caldor Drago because he's locked in the warp in Warhammer 40,000. But again, whole huge side tangent, and just to give you an idea of what that daughter was that they're talking about, to kind of create a little bit more of a level of epicness. Like he's kind of expected to become the god king of that new world, and we haven't seen him come back in full force in Age of Sigmar, so maybe this could be the next thing that we see, where like the Bretonnian knights fuse with wood elf spirits of some sort. But I guess we'll see what happens with that. I mean, Age of Sigmar's kind of got some weird fuckery. But back on track. Araloth himself, as far as the rules go, he doesn't really stand out. There's nothing incredibly crazy about him. His profile is really no better than any other kind of Glade Lord. His special rules are barely even there. He gets a nice 4-up ward save. He gets a nice unbreakable special rule, which I think would be pretty cool. What makes Araloth, I think, a really good candidate for a legendary lord for Wood Elves is that he's just a generic lord. He can have a number of mounts. In the tabletop, he cannot, but I think that if they recreated him in Total War Warhammer, give him a bunch of mounts, hawks or a horse, or even, of course, the forest dragon. We see the Glade Lords have the option to be to mount forest dragons, but Orion and the big master treeman that is just escaping my brain right now, they're the only Durthu, sorry. They're the only legendary lords that the Wood Elves have available. So I think that if we add just Araloth, which is a pretty generic, boring lord, admittedly, but if we kind of make a souped-up Glade Lord, who will then have access to Forest Dragons, he maybe gets Pravanath Rama as a default, and also Scairn the Eye Thief, his little hawk. Maybe that ability, Scairn, has a functionality where it drives down the melee attack and melee defense of units that it targets. So you can kind of use him as a beatstick lord, or a lord that can weaken for an alpha strike of maybe a charge, or even the lord's charge itself, or maybe some Hawk Rider charging in there, because Hawk Riders do have a really good melee damage, despite the fact that they're kind of very weak and have poor morale. But I think Araloth would be a fun lord that is catering more towards a Wood Elf Air Force, which isn't a prevalent thing in tabletop and was never like a well-known thing, but you've got access to Great Eagles, Hawk Riders, and Forest Dragons as a unit in and of themselves. So it'd be really interesting to see Araloth kind of come into the fore as a generic lord, but if he was accompanied with a whole bevy of Wood Elf improvements to their campaign mechanics, to the way that they played on the actual Mortal Empire's map, I think that Araloth could be a really great way to break into that without having to deal with some sort of really ridiculous lore that might take some sort of learning. Like if we were to add in the Sisters of Twilight, they would have to have some sort of crazy mechanics attached to them because of the way that they operate. I mean, you have two lords in one, basically, and that in and of itself is pretty crazy. Now, another option, of course, is Draika, which we can talk about in a separate video, and she would be just pretty much, a caster. This is your only legendary lord that is truly a caster for the Wood Elves. And that's saying something here, right? Like the rest of the lords are either ranged or monstrous or, beasts with hooves. So Araloth kind of fits that stead of just being a standard staple, really just cut run-of-the-mill lord here. He doesn't need to be crazy cool to, I think, fit into the legendary lord slot for the Wood Elves. And since the Wood Elves they only have a total of 5 legendary lords in the book: Araloth, the Twilight Sisters, Orion, Durthu, and Draika. You can fit them all into the game pretty easily, or you just skip out on maybe the Twilight Sisters, because I know that they had released an AMA saying we won't do the Twilight Sisters because of a graphical issue, but that might have changed with the way they're doing things with Total War Warhammer 2. But I guess we can only really speculate and wait and see what they have planned here for us. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this video here as far as just a kind of a means to get the pot brewing on some Wood Elf action. I know that during another one of the AMAs they were saying they want to go back to the Wood Elves and how they are a high priority of theirs to revamp how their campaign plays, and maybe that'll include an FLC. They also said, no DLC for DLC, but at this point, in Total War Warhammer 2, the Wood Elves are not a DLC. They are already incorporated into the game at this point. You did have to buy them in 1, yes, of course, but my point remains here, though, that if you're getting DLC in 2, that is bridging the gap of a 1 and 2 race. Like, let's say this is, you know how they're usually, it's the Grim and the Grave or something like that. I would say that this, if Araloth were chosen, it would be something along the lines of the Bold or the Lordling and the Blank for whatever the matching race would be. It could be Beastmen and Wood Elves always kind of butt heads, so maybe the Brass and the Brave for Tarox the Brass Bull and Araloth, Lord of Talcine here. So that's a pretty cool notion that those are 2 Warhammer 1 races, but you can really make any argument here, right? With Marathian and Alariel, they didn't have any run-ins in lore where they were always at each other's throats, like, oh, I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for you pesky Alariels. Like, that doesn't really fucking happen in the lore. So you can have situations that don't really seem pertinent. Like, you could have the Brave and the Scourge to do the Dark Elves and the Wood Elves, whatever it may be. So love to hear your ideas here on if you think Araloth is a good idea, if you think Araloth could be spruced up to be entirely different, or if you think I'm just completely full of shit because Araloth sucks. And I'll take it. I mean, I totally understand, but I think that as far as CA's penchant for adding in really weird wild card special characters that we didn't expect, like, Skaven, it wouldn't surprise me if we got an Araloth. So I'd love to just kind of discuss what it might be like for him to be in Total War Warhammer 2. But as always, guys, thanks so much for watching here today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, all that kind of action. Go ahead and check out my Patreon. I'm trying to grow that bad boy. I've been updating a lot of my Blood Angels progress as I paint them and assemble the entirety of my army on my Patreon. So if you want to follow the progress of me building out my army that will defeat Turin, you can go ahead and subscribe to my Patreon. That'll give you access to that. But as always, guys, have a good one. Thanks so much for watching today, and take care.